The following is a public preview of the New Models podcast. For our complete library, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com.
You're now listening to New Models.
Welcome to New Models. Our guests are the artists, musicians, and technologists Holly Herndon and Mat Dryhurst. We're speaking to them on the occasion of their exhibition, The Call, currently on view at the Serpentine in London, and the release of their catalog, All Media is Training Data, out this week from Serpentine and Walter Koenig. I'm Lil Internet here with my co-host Carly Busta. Let's get into it.
It's always really easy to strawman tech culture, but tech has its own culture.
Right.
And it actually goes really, really deep. And so there's this kind of sense too where it's like, well, they're not going to invest in this if you're being condescending to them. And why don't you, as allegedly well-read intellectuals from the artistic tradition, why aren't you showing an interesting GitHub or any of the myriad interesting new developments coming from that world that actually tech people do support with their money?
Right.
And this all predates like NFTs or crypto or whatever. This is like in the aughts. It's funny, personally, I'm just like, well, increasingly my loyalties or my just interests more purely live in that world.
Yeah.
Because I tried to do like a piece of performance art for our mutual friend Simon the other day where I was talking, and I was like, my left leg is in more traditional 20th century media. My right leg is following my interests, and my right leg is being pulled really quickly, and my left leg just won't move. It will not budge to the point whereby it's uncomfortable. And at some point, I'm going to have to move my left leg over to closer to where my right leg is, unless it like rips me apart, because one, it seems stuck in a different century, regrettably.
We're in the studio today with Mat Dryhurst and Holly Herndon. It's really great to have you two back on the show. Thank you for making the time.
Of course.
Well, we're actually in their studio.
We are. We're actually recording at their house.
Our bedroom.
The babies are playing.
Very happy to be here.
Well, many listeners are going to already be well familiar with Holly and Mat's practice, or at least some part thereof. Some may have encountered their work this fall at the Serpentine in London, where their show The Call is currently on view. Or maybe you first learned about their work via Spawning.ai, the company they co-founded with Jordan Meyer and Patrick Hoppner with the aim of creating a consent layer for training generative systems. Or maybe you caught Holly and Mat together with Colin Self on tour with Radiohead for Herndon's 2015 album Platform. Or you've been a student at NYU or Strelka or European Graduate School, or in the audience at TED or DLD, or hanging around the Berlin experimental music scene in the aughts. There's so much more that could be added to this short list this year's Whitney Biennial, Mat and Holly's work for Fellowship Gallery, but then this wouldn't be a short list. So I give these representative examples to build an opening question. If we follow your practice from the aughts to the present, we see you working at different places along the chain of cultural production. At first, you're building your own synths, writing code for your own music production, throwing your own shows and parties with friends. I mean, Julian, you and I in the car were talking about Mat being involved in like independent record labels in London.
Yeah, the protocol layer of the 90s.
Of the 90s would be like working at the labels,
Yes.
or Holly at Stanford coming up with a theoretical basis for what's happening to music in the aughts as technology is advancing. But as the 2010s unfold, your attention and energy seems to travel upward to the systems that govern culture's distribution and to the top-level technological protocols that set the very terms for creating practically anything at all, or at least anything that you want to circulate more broadly. One of the things that most interests me about your show at the Serpentine is how it feels operative on multiple levels. The technological infrastructure, including the model, but also the human production of the data, also the project's output, its content, so to speak, and even the governance of how the entire work will exist in perpetuity. wondered if you could talk a bit about where you see the creative act happening now for you. Perhaps you could contextualize this in relation to how you might have thought about it in the early aughts versus where you see the critical site or sites of creative intervention today. As Julian was saying, maybe it's at the protocol level itself has gone through a radical transformation over the past 2 decades. But how do you think about where you intervene when you're creating?
That's a really great question. I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Matt. But part of it is how you're communicating with a public. And I find specifically around this topic of AI or anything that's kind of like technologically quite complicated, you have to communicate at different levels of understanding. And that's something that's really difficult because you need to be able to communicate to someone who is coming at the topic entirely new. So on the kind of like visceral, emotional, you just walk into the space and feel it level. And then also, we're big nerds on this topic and we like to go really deep. So we're also wanting to be in conversation with those who have a very thorough understanding of the topic. So there's so many parallel conversations happening at the same time.
I think that's it. Like, I'm actually not old enough to experience the 90s. But you were
you were alive in the 90s. But
you were in Kuwait in the 90s of all places.
I was listening to System of a Down. But I mean, what's mad to me is that I feel like both of us just repeat ourselves. Like my initial interest was in independent infrastructure. Like I'm an infrastructure nerd. And it was like, oh yeah, the interesting thing about Southern Records where I used to work, this was my first job as a teenager, was that there was a very clear protocol set, almost to the extent that it was kind of suffocating. Because you had John Loder and his disciples who had this very principled understanding of how independent music should run. John was like the informal member of Crass. He's kind of credited as making indie orthodoxy a thing. Like it's kind of his invention to his credit. Like when he died, Ian MacKay credited him for basically making Discord a thing. It's like, so even further upstream of Discord and these kind of independent luminaries, there's a John Loder who's a computer scientist.
DISCHORD, to be clear.
Yeah.
Not the online message system.
No, exactly. Yeah, Discord, the hardcore punk label. Even further upstream, there was a computer scientist called John Loder who had these very set principles for how culture should run, and those then were echoed through Discord and whatever. And that was what initially attracted me to those subcultures, was being like, oh, this is a space that operates entirely differently to everything else, right? Classically, Discord shows were all ages. That's where straight edge comes from. Right. Classically, Discord records were priced a particular way, and the price allowed for anybody to participate. So it was intentionally open in this way, right? And then you fast forward from pursuing that for a period of time to San Francisco. It's like we happened to be in San Francisco. I mean, we moved to San Francisco during the economic crash, which was like pretty...
It was right before 2007 or 2008.
2008.
Yeah, right.
It was literally
the
then,
Occupy time.
Right, exactly. Well, it's 2011, but 2007-8 was the crash.
The crash.
The crash. No, I mean, I remember the crash because I almost joined the military. It was like that bad.
Because you were like looking for employment?
Yeah.
Because you were like suddenly like patriotic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, guys, I know a lot about IDM. Around then, it was like, oh, the platform economy picked up, and that was the first observation, being like, oh, well, being in San Francisco at that time, having friends who were either involved in it or were being displaced by it, it was like, oh, wow, like UX designers have more creative control than most people on Earth.
Yeah.
And all these creative decisions are happening upstream of the production of media. And you see that reflected in the way people act. Mm-hmm. And so clearly around that time, which you'll all remember, right? Like I remember going to parties after Tumblr became a thing,
right,
or Instagram or Twitter, where all of a sudden the way in which people from subcultures I was familiar with acted in a space changed dramatically in accordance with the UX decisions of someone at Instagram or at Tumblr.
Like, for instance, I know you have a couple good examples.
Well, like... I mean, the one that always comes to mind for me is like, I really got into Twitter, and I remember viscerally there being a shift in consciousness happening where I was like, whoa, I'm simultaneously talking to somebody at this party right now, and I'm talking to a fictitious person on the internet simultaneously. And like my thinking started to change almost too much, to be honest, where I was like formatting thoughts in tweet length, and you're like, same with... I remember going
This is when selfies started too. I mean, there was a time before selfies, and that obviously changed the way people were dressing and behaving.
What was her name? Was her name Cala D'Onofrio?
The girl who said she was from the internet?
Yeah. Do you know Cala D'Onofrio?
No, I don't think so. But I do remember...
She was like a Tumblr girl.
She was like a Tumblr girl, like an original
I remember being like,
from
hey,
LA.
like, where are you from? And she was like, the internet. And I was like, whoa.
But she would like take selfies with her very curated Tumblr profile in LA. And this was right at the beginning. I remember being at a party. She would turn up and then she took a picture of herself and then left the party because her whole sense of self had shifted in accordance with this platform and also in accordance with some nerd somewhere in Mountain View or whatever who was making a decision, right? And so that observation synced really well, where you're like, oh, okay, indie label infrastructure created what we understood to be independent music. So as a result, it makes sense to think upstream at the protocol layer or the platform level or whatever, because those decisions will have these aesthetic ramifications, and that has not been kind of acknowledged as a new art medium.
You're saying straight edge was basically deliberately engineered by the all ages industrial complex?
Yeah, church basements are making a killing.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, it also was like, Discord predated Berghain for like orthodox marketing, right? Where it was like Discord was like, oh no, we don't sell any merch. You just put an X on your hand. And it's like, that's kind of like literally the Berghain system, right? Where it's like, no, you're not allowed, this kind of like platform puritanism.
Although what you're saying about Twitter, it's really interesting because I used to tweet a lot, but there was a cognitive program installed in my brain that allowed me to tweet like several times a day. And I eventually kind of like broke the habit. And now that program is gone and I can't like tweet.
Yep.
You talk about it as a kind of flow state where you're just like almost non-consciously
it's like a
able
cognitive
to channel.
habit or like a program that's actually running in your own brain.
Right.
And you aren't really aware of it unless you've had it and then lost it, which I have. But it's true that these platforms, they do install software in your wetware as well.
Right.
Like very consequentially.
Yeah.
And your work has been very conscious of this. I mean, the name of your 2015 album is literally Platform, right? But maybe it really comes to a head with your Serpentine show and the work, The Call. The title of the book associated with it is All Media is Training Data. And I find that a really important marker along the trajectory of what we think of as art right now. Do you want to expand on what you mean by all media as training data? This is for listeners of New Models. We've been talking a lot about the state of content. There's a kind of a refrain that we've had over the past year, in many ways underpinned by your thinking about this. But so what's happened to content, and why do you say all media as training data?
I think there was a profound realization for us, and this was going to seem really banal, but like as soon as something is captured into a piece of media, like a photograph or a video or an audio file, then it can become part of a training canon that you may never even interact with. It may be training a model that you may not even know is happening. And that was a really profound light bulb moment of like, wow, all of this data can go on to have a life in perpetuity. Like one little data point can be a seed for infinite generations in the future. And that's a really profound shift.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been dealing with this data question for quite some time, like the best part of 10 years. And like, you go through the pit of despair, which like you see people like fall off where you're like, you just got it, cool. Like,
Right.
Turns out most of human culture is autoaggressive. And, we produced all this data and then you can produce lots of other stuff that's kind of like what we did, So you go through this like well of despair, but then the next question is just a semi-spiritual observation, which is, everything we do will have ramifications going forward. And it's like, if everything we produce is training data, then it's incumbent on us to produce that training data deliberately. What would you do? There's definitely one layer where people read it with like, no, like media is much more than training data. I'm like, yeah, I agree. Like, that's not what we're saying.
But it's also
that's the thing. Now, undeniably, this is a new dimension to everything that has ever been made. I mean, going back to like 2017, 2018, this is why we put together like the training ensemble. It's why we've done these like large training performances, and why with The Call, there's something almost devotional to this idea of producing something deliberately in order to participate in something much greater than oneself, right? Like to be part of a massive data set. If you start seeing models and these data sets as inherently collective accomplishments or weird abstract collaborations, it gives you a vantage point to think about art in a very, very different way.
Right.
Consistent probably with a lot of the principles that I know you all have explored, Josh has explored, and related to this idea of different protocol for working, right? Where you're
what does this do to the subject, this shift? What does it do to the individual artist myth?
One little phrase that I like to couple with all media is training data is let's not confuse the media for the art itself. Because I think those things work really well together because, yes, there's the media and then there's the really complicated human web of relationships to that media, and that's the discourse and that's the economics around it, everything, all of the messy kind of human parts of it. So maybe that's a good starting point to defining what an artist is, or if that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's where most people get it wrong, right? Because they're like, oh, cool, we have a model that can spit out a million decent looking images an hour.
I call that content. I call that, or not
Exactly.
even. I mean, it's output. It's not art.
So
Art requires
Well, it can
coefficient.
be.
It can
It
be.
depends
No,
on
it can
how
be.
it's done.
But it needs some kind
Yeah.
of social value structure.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
content missing context is hard to justify as art.
It's not inherently art.
But what we determine as art tends to be a like intersubjective consensus system that traditionally has taken place between institutions and publications and artists themselves. And basically, like, your ticket to participate in that is to just say something is art, right? And then a bunch of people, if you're lucky enough, get to debate it viciously. And then some people come out and survive that and they're canonized. I think who we tend to call artists are people who go through that really brutal debate and then come out the other side of it. And for me, those people are people who create distinction in the time they live in. And actually, the closer you get to that conception of art and artistry, I think the more resilient you see art being to automation systems.
Oh,
Because you're
definitely.
like, it's a protocol. Oh, protocol is just another word for a practice.
Right.
And it's all
Totally.
these things that are upstream of the media produced, right? Like Trevor Paglin is an artist I like. Trevor has a Trevor-ness. like if you threw a topic at me right now, I might be able to mimic, how would Trevor think about that?
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally. There's also a Matt and Holly-ness.
Sure, well, exactly. And you're like, that's the
There is
scarce.
literally enough data in your
Yeah.
Twitter that there could be a
Probably,
yeah.
you know, and that's an interesting question. I mean, then we're really
Of
talking,
course.
right? If you can actually
Holly's voice and Matt's Twitter.
if you can really replicate that, then we're really talking, but you can't really. And
Yeah,
like
right.
with us, like we get asked a lot of questions like, oh, well, we knew you from music. And it's like, well, yeah, like honestly, we've constantly been doing whatever projects we were particularly interested in at the time. Some of them happen to interact with the 20th century industry.
Exactly.
And that's great. But like, you know, tons of like contemporary artists who had bands, right?
Totally.
But our band got pretty big, like did pretty well. And so now it's like, oh, well, your music is like, no, honestly, we were just always doing strange stuff. And like,
All those categories are sort of silly. It's like
that-
you just like could be propelled most efficiently by certain
And that's
industries
exactly
at
it.
certain times.
That's the thing. It's just this weird industrial reality
Yeah.
we kind of grew up in. Increasingly, people are growing up in less.
Yeah.
Where you studied in a field and that was what you did. And
Yeah.
you trained to be and it's like these industries are all kind of waning or blurring into each other. And that's maybe more consistent, I think, with how we've always worked than being doggedly committed to one particular, like the music industry is slightly inorganic.
Right. I mean, how many
Yes.
friends do we have both in the art world and the music world who are sad because the
Yes.
format that they have no longer has a effective container to be circulated? But you want to tell them, like, it's not you. Your art is still very meaningful. It's
course.
just it doesn't match the way that media has changed.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. I think, a lot of people have been prepared for something that never came.
That's right.
And a lot of people got rug pulled by just shifts in media consumption
Yeah.
that have nothing to do with the value of their work. In fact, it tends to be the opposite. It's like
Totally.
often the more rich work is the stuff that it just can't be adequately communicated in these networks.
We could totally digress into a
Yep.
Charlie XCX brat, but I'm going to bracket that for another time. And like the success of that being like
Better
that,
not.
as you, I think, said it best, the album is the meme.
Yeah,
so
sure,
to shorthand
that's
that.
true, yeah.
But we can save the Charlie conversation
Yeah.
for bonus content at some point. I want to hear more about the call and what you're doing at the Serpentine, but I want to maybe frame it in terms of the art world. You were included in this year's Whitney Biennial. You currently have a show on view at the Serpentine. Your work has also been collected and exhibited by the likes of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and yet the art world that you're a part of, that perhaps you're representing or forging, differs from the art world that we've watched come undone over the past decade and a half with the rise of network media. I think we've all read Dean Kissick's cover story for this current issue of Harper's, where he lays out the legacy art world's fear of the present, its tendency to omit from view anything that threatened its 20th century formation of power, which very often meant art that meaningfully engaged with new forms of media and new forms of human-machine collaboration. There are several threads that we could follow here, but I want to ask you to sketch out for us the art world that you see emerging.
It's quite a rabbit hole.
I know.
I don't know. It's odd to do it without sounding scathing.
If you're hearing this message, you've completed the first step towards becoming a New Models member. To continue, visit patreon.com/newmodels or newmodels.substack.com. A complete library containing hundreds of rare New Models episodes awaits.